Hi, good afternoon and good morning to everyone joining us on Pacific Time. I'm Lieutenant Commander Laura Steger, Public Affairs Officer for the Sea Services Leadership Association, and I'm so excited to kick off today's session of the Joint Women's Leadership Virtual Series with our special celebrity guest, combat veteran, sought-after keynote speaker, and author of the award-winning book, The Frontline Generation, Marjorie K. Eastman. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi, Laura. You made me laugh when you said celebrity.
Well, I think you're our first celebrity on our series, so welcome.
No, just a soldier, just a woman, just a future friend.
Great. So before we kick off this session, I'd like to first thank our sponsors who made it possible for us to hold our virtual series and for you to join us today. They are Johnson & Johnson, USAA, and Amazon Military. So thank you all for your outstanding support to SSLA. Following Marjorie's presentation, we'll also have the chance to hold a question and answer session. So if you're joining us today on Zoom, please type your questions directly into the Q&A box. And you'll also have the chance to participate in a live poll during today's webinar. So when prompted, please take a moment to plug in your response into that poll. And for everyone watching our stream on the Joint Women's Leadership Symposium Facebook page, we want to hear your questions too. So if you have any questions for Marjorie, please type those into the comments section on the video post, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. And as always, the views and opinions expressed in this webinar are of the speaker and do not represent the views of the Sea Services Leadership Association, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, or other federal entities. And we are recording this session and we'll be posting to SSLA's YouTube and social media pages, so you can feel free to share that link with your friends and colleagues. So now I'd like to introduce our guest, Marjorie K. Eastman. Marjorie is a combat veteran, having served as a United States Army intelligence officer and commander, including 2 combat deployments, in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, the other in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. She was ranked the #1 military intelligence company commander in Eastern Afghanistan and was awarded the Bronze Star for meritorious service as a combat commander, as well as the Combat Action Badge. Marjorie is the author of the award-winning book, The Frontline Generation, How We Served Post 9/11. The book began as a personal memoir for her son and became the first to define post 9/11 service and leadership. She's also sought-after keynote speaker, panelist, and contributing writer, and has been described as a veteran thought leader in PBS's Veterans Coming Home initiative. In 2018, Marjorie was also selected as one of the nation's top 25 influencers supporting the military community, known as the Mighty 25, and was a 2019 recipient of the prestigious 10 Outstanding Young Americans Award. Marjorie is also involved with charities and boards that support girls, women, veterans, and entrepreneurs. And most recently, she served as a member of the Next Generation Council of Advisors for the National Cross-Partisan Movement with Honor, a founding board member for Bunker Labs Tennessee Board, the president and COO of the YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee, and as a state leader with the Veterans for Smart Power Network for the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. As a combat veteran, military spouse, and mother, and recognized thought leader, Marjorie continues to positively shape the narrative for veterans, women, the value of service, and frontline leadership. Marjorie, I'm so excited that you're taking part in our webinar today. So thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. It's always like strange to sit there and listen to your bio when someone reads it.
And I had to condense it too. This isn't even the whole bio.
Well, thank you so much. It was a real honor when you guys reached out and you asked me to be part of the series. I am such a big fan of your organization and of course JWLS. Last year was a very special year at JWLS because we launched the bookstore for all female veterans, something that's going to be a sustain that we're going to continue to do throughout the year. So I'm excited to be part of this series today.
Great, thank you, Marjorie.
All right, well, let's jump into this. As I said, I'm excited to be part of this virtual series. And as Laura mentioned, I am a former intelligence officer, so I love to ask questions. So let's start there and get a tally going for the group. Please answer this question. Have you ever thought about writing a book? Can I answer it too? Let me see. Oh, I'm going right now. Da, 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 da. Is it yes? Is it no? Okay, I'm going to submit mine as well. All right. So as we'll stop in a minute to see what people ended up voting and what the percentage was. But did you know there's actually a New York Times recent article that talks about how 81% of people, when asked that question, say that someday they would like to write a book? Now, I have to tell you, I never had a plan to write a book. Then when I served in the military and in the intelligence community, I really had no plans. I mean, in Intel, you don't write books, right? Well, I became an accidental author in 2012. Go ahead, next slide. In 2012, when my little boy, my baby, was 6 months old, he was diagnosed with infant cancer. Neuroblastoma is the name of one of the most rare types of cancer that's found in a few hundred babies every year. It often goes undetected, and it has a mortality rate of upwards of 70%. We stumbled upon it, and my son Hank, his tumor was removed in September, ironically, Child Cancer Awareness Month. Now, the sweetest 4 words I think I've ever heard from the doctor and throughout my entire life was right after the surgery when Dr. Day said, "We had clear margins," meaning they got it all, or so we hoped. During the first year after a cancer diagnosis and removing a tumor, people that lived through that, my husband and I, we can attest it's a special kind of hell because cancer does come back and it shows up elsewhere. We had endless doctor visits, needle pokes, and tears. I drew a lot from my time in the military during this year so that I could survive. And I began to write. I was writing the stories and people who inspired, strengthened, and hardened me, which made all the difference. And besides, I wanted Hank to know Mac and Schmitty, Vasquez and Groff, and so many others. I wanted them to help shape the man that I wanted Hank to become one day. Looking back, I know that I was writing about the man I hoped my son would become because I was trying to convince myself he would one day become a man. Next slide. Today, my little man is 8 and he is cancer-free and a cancer survivor. This is a photo of us just a few weeks ago. He ran out in the rain to meet me in the driveway when I returned home from work. And as you can see, our tops are wet and we are celebrating dodging the downpour of rain that took place just after that. My son also now has a copy of Mommy's book called The Frontline Generation. I wrote it for him. Next slide. My why started with Hank. Then, the longer I was out of the military, the more I realized our story needed to be told. My presentation today will have 2 parts. First, why we must tell our story. I will provide 3 reasons and attempt to convince you to become a storyteller in whatever job or path that you choose. And I think right now is a good time to pause. Julia, do we have those results back from the questionnaire? How many people want to write a book? Nice. Look at that, 88%. So good, this target audience, especially women veterans, we are above the average of that 81. So that's great to see. So the why, I think that this is going to reaffirm and why that 88% is terrific. Thanks, Julia, for pulling that up. Now that's the first part is talking about the why. The second part of the presentation today, I will focus on how you can tell your story. I will do this by sharing 3 stories and highlighting the techniques used in each of them that you can use as well. Next slide. Unmatched currency. Let's begin with my first why for you. Check out the article that I wrote a few years ago on military.com if you want a more in-depth explanation of this. It's called Why You Should Write a Book. But you have a perspective as a warfighter that only a warfighter can offer, and that matters. Recent numbers from the VA determine just over 7% of living Americans have served in the military. Yet since 9/11, fewer than 1% have worn a uniform. So my fellow 1%ers, I want to compare this to a recent US census that nearly 2% of Americans have a doctoral degree, and that normally requires a published thesis on their area of study. You get what I'm getting at? Veterans are a rare entity and have important insight that transcends not only historical data, but industry relevance. Next slide. My second why, go ahead and go back one slide, to misconception. My second why is about misconception. A few years ago, I was actually asked during an interview, as a woman, you just sat on a base when you were deployed, right? Seriously. The greater part of our country does not understand how we serve, how all veterans serve, let alone how women veterans are serving. Misconception is real. Next slide. All right, let's stay right here. So check out this. This is the Veteran Civic Health Index chart that's part of their regular report produced every year. It's in partnership with Got Your Six, American Express, Macy's, National Conference of Citizenship. And what this chart is telling us, it's consistently showing veterans when compared with non-veterans have higher percentages of turning out to vote, volunteering in their communities, giving money to charities, and just showing up. So veterans didn't just have a prior job. When we took an oath, that was a promise. And that promise is for action and each other. And it doesn't go away. So this index is proof that when you do take that oath, it's not something that's just undone. It stays with you. That's offering an unmatched currency, and that's also getting at misconception. Next slide. All right, I covered this. Let's go one more. Every time I see this photo, it just makes me so happy. I made the decision to serve in the military after the September 11th attacks. When I was in uniform, I learned firsthand how those who have skin in the game are from every walk of life. We are not just sitting on bases, as I was asked in that one interview. We struggled together, we solved problems together, and we grew together. We're men and women, we're Black, white, brown, Christian, Muslim, homosexuals, heterosexuals. We are a lot of things. And all the while, I watched how those around me, we found common ground to make it to higher ground. You see the Caucasian male in the middle of this slide, one of my best sergeants, Sergeant Groff. He's now a police officer back home in Texas. And if you were to ask Groff if Black lives matter, he'd probably roll his eyes at the question and say, hell yeah. He would have given his life for that Black man next to him, his corporal, Tess. And if you were to ask Tess what he's going to tell his daughters one day about what women are capable of, well, he endured rocket attacks and drove through ambushes next to Courtney for a year. He can absolutely tell you what a woman is all about. You see, service is a force that gave us meaning. It united us. And we learned a very important lesson about the front line, that it's not a place, that it's us. It's the person to your left and to your right. And this is in combat and here at home. So misconception's real. Our unmatched currency is undeniable. And we have a responsibility to share this story. Next slide. Define. My third and final why for why you should tell your story. Do not let anyone else define you. Let's actually dive right into a story for this one. A chapter in my book, next slide. A chapter in my book is titled Asking the Right Questions. Do you ask why not every time you ask why? Why not a millennial? This rookie interrogator, the stunning Black woman you see on the screen, working on her college degree, who could be the one to unearth the largest weapons cache recovered outside of Bagram in 2010. Why not? I'd like to introduce you to Specialist Ashley Johnson. The prohibitive culture in the Middle East did not allow men to talk with women, and clearly we desperately needed to reach the other half of the population. So, like the Navajo Code Talkers, that group of Marines in World War II of Native American descent who offered a unique skill that aided combat operations, so too did women post 9/11 in the Middle East. Their differentiation helped change the tide of war. Next slide. Now, sources who provide the intel talk for a whole multitude of reasons. Sometimes it's for money, sometimes they want medical care. Sometimes they say, I only will talk with a woman. Well, on this day, Ashley connected. She built rapport and she did her job well, like I saw her do every day that I served with her. We were on a convoy before long, and we recovered 600 munitions that were hidden in a small section of a cleared landmine field. Now, I watched Ashley secure the information, guide the truck commander, and I walked with her through that field. Now, working with a company of interrogators, I learned quickly it's not about asking questions, it's about asking the right questions. Next slide. When we detonated the weapons cache on site that day, this was the result. Now, I've heard a lot of people ask, are we setting women up for failure if we open all positions to them? What we should be asking is if we're setting our mission up for failure if it's performed without women. The Army says it's the best. Mission first, people always. Now, Ashley saved countless lives that day because she could pull the information from the source. And gender did not define her, but it differentiates her. And differentiation adds value. Next slide. Don't count anyone out. Don't put your limits on them. Leverage differences. Now, this is the end of the story. Why should you tell your story after hearing this? Well, why not? Don't limit and count yourself out. Dwell in the why not, because you will need to communicate your unmatched currency your entire life, perhaps for a job interview or an application to grad school or when you launch a venture. The untold story, your story, is essentially your differentiation. And remember, differentiation adds value, and each and every one of you has it. Next slide. Now, on to the second part of the presentation. How can you tell your story? First, before I dive into the 3 stories that will provide examples on how you can, I want you to consider this. Next slide. Aristotle, one of the founding fathers of communications, believed persuasion occurs when these 3 components are represented, are part of the story, so to speak. Ethos, logos, pathos. As a refresher, ethos is credibility. Think achievements or experience. Logos is logic, data. And pathos? Pathos is the act of appealing to emotion. Now, the percentage of how to balance these 3 pillars will probably surprise you. Check it out. That's right. People are moved and stories impact the balance when you have this arrangement of your content. It's recommended also that you should devote about 65% or more of your content to stories because that helps you establish trust and builds a deeper emotional relationship with your audience. And this is across the spectrum, friends. This is across industries, functional areas, whatever you're doing. The power of a story will always help you. So let's jump in to our first story and learn some hows. Next slide. Story number 1. Go ahead to the next slide. Now, have you heard the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover? One shouldn't prejudge the worth or value of something or someone by its outward appearance, right? Well, the idiom exists because people do judge. So you can believe that I Go ahead and go to the next slide. There you go. Now this, we removed the title and all the other stuff. This is the image on my book cover. Now the figure in the middle is wearing a bright pink. That's a little girl who lived in the caves that you see on the far right side, which is the mountainside known for the 4th and 5th centuries that had the Buddhas carved into them by monks that lived there. Unfortunately, those beautiful Buddhas were destroyed in March of 2001 by the Taliban. Now, for authors, receiving the first copy is an unforgettable moment when you publish a book, especially your first book. My husband and I actually drove a couple hours to the warehouse where it was printing, so we didn't have to wait for it to arrive in the mail. We were standing in the lobby with our little boy, our son, and I was handed the envelope with the first book. I don't even think I was breathing. I opened it and I looked at it and I immediately turned and handed it to my son, who was 4 years old at the time. My son looked at the book in his hands and he's doing the 4-year-old wiggly dance, right? He looks at the book, he looks up at mama, he's looking at me, and he says, "Look, mama, it's daddy." He points at the soldier on the right side and he says, "Look, mama, it's daddy." My son thought the soldier was daddy. My book, I'm the soldier. And he said, "It's daddy." Go to the next slide. In fact, here's the moment right after it happened when we handed that book to Hank. You see, my son was anchored. He's only seen daddy in uniform. He's never seen me in uniform, so he never would have thought that that was mommy on the cover of the book. We corrected him. Go ahead to the next slide. My husband and I corrected Hank because he needed to know that I held the hand of that little girl and that she and I were on that book cover. She and other girls in Afghanistan now have the choice, the option to go to school because US and coalition forces removed the Taliban from power. Now, this is the end of the story. And this is what I refer to as my mommy, it's daddy story, the story about anchors and not judging, but understanding there can be an innocence in misunderstanding. The action that must take place is correction. Be brave, sound off, as we say in the military, which will always mean speak up, speak loudly, speak clearly. The how I want to point out of this story and its structure, 3 points to take away. First, what is at stake? Every story must have something at stake. In this example, the stake is, who do we think a veteran is? Who do we think a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine is? Number 2, you must have a target to hit with every story. Aim for an aha moment, that point to be made. Now for this story, was about anchors, being mindful. We all have them, and how we must realize they can keep us from important truths. And number 3, lighten up. You've got to tell jokes. The power of levity is real. Every time I tell this story, people always laugh that they thought Hank thought the soldier was daddy on my cover. Sometimes serious topics can be best communicated when you lighten up. So use this as a tool. Next slide. On to story number 2. Next slide. Let me ask you this. Has anyone ever broken down? What about hitchhiking? Has anyone ever been hitchhiking? Now, have you ever done both of these in one night in a combat zone? Well, this is the premise of this story, and I want you to meet a few people. From left to right, you see Kimball, Lundy, Vasquez, my Army self, and Schmitty. Now, we needed to get back to our original base. You see, because let me back up a little bit. Because for people that haven't been deployed, they may not know this. A 2-day mission overseas could easily turn into 5 because rotary assets can be rerouted for operations or weather. And this is what happened when one of my teams delivered an MRAP to another forward operations base. We needed to get back to our original base, and the option to hitchhike is always a viable option when you're deployed, if you can believe that, when you're moving around with the different maneuver elements. Well, that night, a Georgia National Guard convoy made a pit stop at our FOB, and they had 5 open seats. So we coordinated for it, and we filled in amongst different trucks, and we headed out in the dark of the night to get back to our original base. Now, it was a cold night, and we were wearing the same clothes, the same sweat that we had had on for 5 days, but our bellies were full because we had been stuck on a French base, and they served brie cheese and warm croissants, if you could believe that. Well, we knew there was a heightened risk when we went out on the convoy that night. Earlier in the morning, the French clearance unit had uncovered an IED on the same road we were about to go on, and the day before, a convoy had been ambushed. Next slide. About an hour into our convoy, one of our trucks broke down in an area that we refer to as the switchbacks. These are the sides of the mountains, up and down, that are like slippery steps. As you can see, it's difficult to recover. The radio signals are intermittent, and the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, they were already rerouted on another mission. When we called in to try to get some support, we heard stand by. Well, are you going to stand by there, or are you going to figure it out? Will you make pain your purpose? We scrounged our vehicles, and we found a way to tow the vehicle using parts and pieces I don't think we've ever put together before. Only our collective input could have done this. Now, Lundy was in my truck. All the other soldiers that I was with, working through this problem that night, in the middle of the night, they were all strangers, essentially. So not long after we started moving along, we were towing that one vehicle, a second truck broke down, and we had to do this rodeo all over again. Finally, we did make it back to base, and surprisingly, without coming into contact that night. Next slide. The lesson on frontline leadership is this: whether you're deployed in garrison or you're deployed, you're garrison, the military offers ample opportunities to always embrace the suck, as we call it. And the moments like these, we really shine with our resourcefulness and that threshold of discomfort where we have to be nimble to the curveballs. That's what service does for us. And you know those strangers? They were strangers. I'd never met them until that night. I only knew Lundy. But we were bound together by our ethos, our values, our training, and the mission. And that's a solid bond. So the takeaway is, don't just stand by in life. Make sure you're charting your path, your aspirations, and you need to write that op order for your life, or perhaps the book that you want to write one day. Do not be passive and wait for someone else to do this for you. Now, this is the end of the story. The how that I want to recap, the 3 points in taking away when we kind of go through the structure of this story are these. Number 1, relatable. So not everyone's been to a combat zone, right? But immediately I tried to relate the start of the story to something that a lot of people have experienced, like breaking down. Do this right away, that's key. Number 2, misfortune. Stories, good stories, have struggle in them. Audience and readers want someone to root for. They want to see how you get through the struggle and the misfortune, because we've all had struggle and misfortune. And so we can learn from that. And number 3, memorable. Paint the picture. So I said things like the same clothes, the same sweat, full bellies of brie and warm croissants. And I used an analogy, which is considered a storyteller's secret weapon, of describing the switchbacks as those slippery steps. These are words that really help people connect and remember the points in your story. Next slide. All right, story number 3, our final for the presentation today. Next slide. We are not all meant to wear a uniform, yet we are all meant to leave a mark. We all have a purpose. Meet Claire, my former colleague from Lockheed Martin and Denver's loudest lacrosse mom. She is feisty, 5 foot nothing Italian woman who will quickly tell you what's on her mind. But what was on her heart one day when she saw children in the photos of my company that was on patrols in a remote village in Afghanistan was this. She was cleaning up her garage one weekend and she found a pile of Beanie Babies. You know, the 1990s, all the rage Beanie Babies that were very popular. You'd find them in all the hallmarks. Well, that gave her an idea. I wonder if Marjorie's soldiers could use these and maybe pass them out, perhaps build some goodwill. Her idea was perfect for my company because my company was a full spectrum intelligence operation, military intelligence company. So we were doing offense, defense, stability, and support missions. Now, what did Claire do? She not only boxed up this pile of Beanie Babies, but she rallied Denver, Colorado by way of a Craigslist ad. Over a couple of weeks, she met people in the parking lot of Starbucks and Kohl's on her lunch break. She opened up a temporary P.O. box and ultimately collected more than 100 Beanie Babies. She paid a ridiculous shipping fee and a gigantic box arrived at my APO. Next slide. Two of my corporals, Nick and Carly, delivered the majority of these Beanie Babies to children in a remote village in Bamyan province. What was most likely their very first and only stuffed animal. Now, this is heroic in the sense of it is a goodwill type of mission. And the troops in my village were able to connect, which resulted in improved relations with the village leaders. Now, the takeaway of this story is that you must wear your cape. The point to be made in this chapter of my book is not whether if you have a cape, but what color is it? How will you shine and make a difference? Because we're all capable of doing so. So let me say this one more way. Are you waiting for that promotion, that bigger title to really lead? Well, you do not need a title to be a leader. In fact, not all people with titles are leaders. Own your sphere of influence today. Now, this is the end of the story. Let's go through and construct the 3 hows that you can use in your stories. Number 1, there must be a hero. That hero can be you as you describe something. If you're in an interview and you need to show something that you've done, that hero can be someone else. In this one, Claire clearly is our hero. A hero is a must. People want that and need that in a story. Number 2, share what only you can share. Teach something novel. People want a new story. Has anyone ever heard of a Beanie Baby story like this? I don't think so. And number 3, stories need to be emotional. You must touch the heart and the mind. These little kids in Afghanistan, this is probably the first and only stuffed animal. That's an emotional language and message and sentence that was specifically put in the story for that reason. Next slide. Okay, you've heard a few stories. You have takeaways on the how. And this slide is how I'm rounding it out and closing it up. And it's what I call my call to action slide. Citing General McChrystal's quote when he endorsed the Frontline Generation, I want those last few words to sink in you. We'll be better for it. Your service means something. It makes a difference. Tell your untold story. You are the unmatched currency. You are how we combat misconception. And you must help me define our narrative, which will ultimately shape our country and our future. You're part of this era's Frontline Generation, and I'm proud to have served in your ranks because I was the better for it. Next slide. Well, we started with a question, so let's end with one too before we jump into Q&A. Throughout my presentation, I provided several tips on the how, but there are a few that I didn't. So on this slide, you have a list of books that you should have in your library that will help teach you more about communication skills that you need in any path that you're going to go down in your future or for now. So there's techniques like jaw drop, making it personal, the rule of threes, and many more. So check out the list of resources that I have up there. And before we jump into Q&A, I want to just do one more ask. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to put our networks together because we are stronger together. Thank you.
Well, Marjorie, thank you so much for that great presentation. I'm inspired to read your book. And after all your advice, I think I'm inspired to write one too. So I was one of those, one of that 88% in the beginning who answered yes. So can't wait to jump in, read more of your book, and see how I can tell my story as well. So we'll get to some questions in just a moment, but first, I'm excited to announce that we'll have a trivia question following our Q&A. And Marjorie has generously announced that she'll give away a free signed copy of her book, The Frontline Generation, to the first person who answers our question correctly. So please stay tuned. We'll get to that giveaway right after our Q&A. So we'll get to some questions now. So for our attendees on Zoom, please put those right into the Q&A box. And for anyone watching on Facebook, you can type those into the Facebook comment section right under the video, and we'll try to get to as many as we can today. So Marjorie, our first question is about your book and your personal journey. So I imagine it would have to be a very emotional process writing a book, especially because a lot of your book is composed of your personal journals during your time serving in combat. So can you speak to that a little bit, how that process was for you and that personal journey that you underwent as you wrote your book?
Now, I'm so grateful for that question because I think a lot of people naturally, I think especially if you grew up in a time before social media, you didn't share everything all the time, right? Like there's a level of privacy that you don't talk about a lot of your feelings. And I think that that's maybe an edge that millennials have is they're more comfortable to talk about emotions and personal situations. But for myself, oh no, I was not comfortable, sharing these journal entries and stories from my time in combat, one of the most vulnerable moments in my life, obviously. And I had to just get comfortable with the uncomfortable, which the military taught me to do very well. And I realized the value of when I would open up and share a personal story, that all of a sudden that connectivity and I know this from my studies and my research and from doing things in different businesses that of course you need to have a personal story, but sharing your personal in communicating something you believe in or you think that needs to be told is tough, right? So it was just I started writing in 2012 and the book wasn't published till 16. So it took me a couple of years to finally go, okay, I can do this. I can do this. Because it truly was. And as you'll see as a storyteller, once you start getting personal and you share personal to be relatable to the point that you're trying to make, there's nothing more powerful.
That's just a great perspective. We actually have a question from Facebook from Morgan Martin. She's asked how long it took for you to process your experience and who did you trust to proofread and critique your book?
That's fun. So how long it took me to process my experience? Great questions, Morgan, by the way, because as you know, I love great questions. How long, I still to today, I process, my experience of being in the military and serving to combat tours, just to get real with you, like literally yesterday, my husband and I came home from a weekend camping trip. And, when you're in a tent and in the middle of the night, you've got to go to the bathroom, what are you going to do, right? You go outside, you go to the bathroom. It's not like you're in your home and you're comfortable and you walk to your bathroom. If you remember this, when we were deployed, you had to get your weapon, you had to get your PT belt to not make some sergeant major, angry if you were walking around base without your whatevers. You had to put your boots on, and then you had to walk over to the Connex that they, modified to be a bathroom. If you were so lucky to have one of those, you may have not if you were on different cops and different fobs. But it was like a process to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, so I mean, and I was just thinking about that this weekend with my husband, and we were going, wow, it's just wow, some of the things that we've done, even on the little granular level. things like that. So I think you continue to process it. And to the second question, I believe that was how long did it take you to write the book? Was that the second question that Morgan had?
And to proofread and who you
Oh,
trusted
who
to
I
help
trusted.
proofread your book. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I started sending out, a few of the short stories to my husband, obviously, because he was continuing going back and forth deploying. And then I sent them to my mother-in-law because she is the kind of woman, I know if I sent it to my mom, she'd be like, oh, it's perfect, honey, I love it, because what's what moms, typically say. Well, my mother-in-law is a just absolutely gem of a woman. She loves you absolutely to your core, and she will tell you if she has an opinion about something different. So she and I get together perfectly, right? So I knew that if I sent it to her, she would be really inquisitive and give me some hard feedback that I was like, kind of scared to do with anybody else. And then after that, I literally, I realized I'm like, I know I need beta readers. I took sections of what became my book, and I sent those out to beta readers, especially to the soldiers I served with, so that they could see and kind of reaffirm how I retold the story and agree with everything, and they all did. But then it was in the hands of my editor, and off it went.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I think we can all agree that mothers-in-law can be very honest. So I think you chose wisely in terms of book editors. So I'd like to talk next about mentors. So I think that no matter how high ranking you are or where you are in life, it certainly helps to have a mentor whom you can speak to. Who are your mentors, and were there certain mentors that you reached out to as you were going through the process of writing your book?
Oh my goodness. My mentors are they are amazing. I'm so blessed for all the mentors that I have. And, I didn't actively seek out as much as I should have looking back. I should have really gone and say, all right, I know this person's written a book. I need to go and talk to them. I did a lot of information interviews with people that have done it to just put all the information together on how do I do this? How do I make this a book? And all of that. But one of like, to be honest, my mentors that I truly leaned on were my business professors. I had just finished business school at the time, and that was that really difficult time in my life when our son had been diagnosed with cancer, and I was writing, and I literally had gone back and I took a severance from my job because when my son had cancer, we really had that 1 year where we're holding our breath, and we didn't know if we would have him after that year. So typically what you do when you graduate business school, I graduated Vanderbilt, you go out and you get your ROI and you continue on your path. Well, I was hanging out with my um, writing. And so after that year, when we had that confidence that Hank was going to beat it, he was a warrior, he was going to beat this cancer. I got the confidence that, okay, I'm ready to go back into the professional world. And so I went back to my awesome business school, Vanderbilt, and all my professors and counselors were like, okay, we'll go into some ideas. And one of them had just asked, is there anything that you've found a lot of joy in over the last year through this crucible? And I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I've been writing. And it was that moment where that counselor said, tell me more. And so that really shaped my path after leaving business school to be more involved in communications. I thought for sure I would do something else. And so,
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a good lead into our next question. So a lot of our members in SSLA may be transitioning or thinking about transitioning to post-military life and careers. So can you talk a little bit about how your experiences in the military prepared you for a career, specifically as the Director of Communications at Net Power is what our question, our Lauren Kervnick is asking you.
perfect.
Okay.
Well, I got to tell you, I absolutely loved every minute of being in the military. And, that crucible that I was in when my son was diagnosed with cancer and I was finishing up business school, I was actually hanging out in the IRR for that year. And I had no intent of getting out of the military. I was going to stay in till I was a 20-star general and I was going to crush it and retire at 90. I absolutely loved every minute of wearing that uniform. But that crucible really just spun me around and changed my path in ways that it just did. That's what crucibles do, right? So I didn't even have a plan, so to speak, either a transition plan on what you're going to do and how you're going to get out. Um, but what I can say is that, how the military has prepared me in my current role. It's again, it's, working with people with different expertise. So at Net Power, I'm working for a clean energy technology firm today. And I get to work with the most awesome engineers. I get to work with the most brilliant minds in finance, in law, in operations and business development. And it's just, again, it's like being in the military or being in the intelligence community, where you have to pull all different pieces together and you have to put it together towards one mission. And then, of course, communications is the undercurrent for all of that. So that's really how I feel the military set me up into where I am today.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about one of your whys, about misconceptions. So I think many of us may have faced misconceptions throughout our careers, but what do you think are the most prominent or dangerous misconceptions that face women in the services, and how can we defy them and how can we overcome them?
Oh, that's such a big question. Um, you know, you overcome them again by sounding off. We must speak up for ourselves, and we must speak up for our battle buddies, for other people. And I always love to tell people that they must have their man ambassadors. They must have men that are their mentors and cheering them on, because there are so many good men. And I have had more men as mentors that have positively shaped and influenced my military career, my career in the intelligence community, and everything else. We can't count them out. And it's the same thought process of, when I was telling the story about Ashley on, how we had to engage the other half of the population in the Middle East, and we could do that with women on the battlefield. Well, why would we not want to engage the other half of the population, men, to help us women as we pursue our professional goals and our personal goals? So don't discount that, and that is so powerful, and that's such an important part of the whole equation in all of this.
Great. You shared a few resources, and we'd like to share those with the attendees following the call today. Are there any particular resources that you really rely on, either in your business life, your personal life, your life as a mom, anything that you can give us as your preferred resources for staying resilient?
All of the above. Does that count? Is that a good answer? There's actually a chapter in my book. It's about, you see a light, you don't hear one, and it's about the chapter really focuses on leadership, and it talks about how when we're in the military, we have to leverage all different kinds of aspects of how we can motivate people. And we have to do that for ourselves as well. So, you can kind of think, jokingly of, you always had the people that were always in the gym, and they were counting on those endorphins. Or you had the people that were like, were in church and they got super religious and they really went deep into that space. In every space for my own personal motivation, because why not, right? I'm a big why not person. So I think leveraging all resources, being open-minded to, watching how other people do it, that's a kind of a little simple follow the leader. If you see someone else doing something that's helpful, that is good for them, well, maybe that could be something that you could utilize and be part of your tool. So that's what I'd recommend.
Okay, great. And, I think we're living in times that are, very stressful to everyone and very trying times. You mentioned an important thing is to keep a sense of humor. So how are you doing that?
Well, that's very tricky sometimes, right? We look at what's going on with the pandemic and, the civil unrest, racial injustice. There are so many things. It feels like we're at a boiling point, right? And I truly feel that our experience in the military, how many times have we felt like we were pushed to a point and then someone there's a reason why the military is known for its humor, right? Sometimes it's dark humor, That's not necessarily bad, but we have to rely on humor. There was always that person that would chime in and say something that would kind of lighten up the situation. Um, and so I can just think of so many of the situations, that I've been in the military. I think that's part of it too. You see what you look for. That's not my quote. I wish I could own that, but there's a quote. It's a long-standing quote. We always find what we're looking for. If you can look for positivity, if you can say, I'm going to find some humor in this. We're going to create it. We're going to keep moving. Let's keep doing this one foot in front of the other. That's part of how we keep going and we get through this. It's often now we find that, with courage isn't something you have that when times are tough. Courage is what you earn when you go through the tough times. So we've earned so much of this, especially service members. Don't forget what you've earned and what you're made of, and just rely on that.
Right. That's so true and so inspiring. So Marjorie, for that 88% of us who are looking to possibly write a book, what is the best first step that we can take on that journey to telling our story?
So it's so funny because, when I talked with my literary agent at the time, they said, well, this is a couple year process. And I'm like, you don't know me. This is going to be done in a year. Like, I'm just going to knock this out and keep moving. I've got other things to do, right? No. It takes, time. You've got to do this and that. I'm like, yeah, I have a full-time job. I'm a mommy. I've got all these other things. No, I got this. But I mean, just set your expectations. I was frustrated early on because I was like, come on, I want to get this, going. But it takes time. It does take time when you say, I'm going to write a book. I would also say the first step, besides just setting your expectations, is you have to write. You must write. And, think about it and back plan it. Take these aspects that I shared with you, storytelling. What's at stake for your book? What's your unique value proposition? Can you make it personal? Is it emotional? Does it touch the heart and the mind? Think about that balance again of, the ethos, the logos, the pathos. It's an organized effort. It's not just something that just rolls out and it's like, ta-da, here's a book, So it does take organization. And again, I think I mentioned this in one of the stories on the how. What's your goal? My goal was to write this book for Hank. Done, right? But then, obviously, book publishers, they don't want that as your goal. They're like, no, you're going to write a couple books, right? We'll sign you for several books. Your goal is going to be this or that. And I'm like, nope, I'm not growing up to be a book writer. That's not it. I need to write this book. And so just know your goals and just be honest about them. Is this book going to be a platform to help you launch a business? Is it going to set you up for running for office? Is it going to be about, breaking into a thought leadership level or area for women's issues or African American issues or whatever you want? Just make sure you have your goal.
Great. Well, Marjorie, thank you so much again for joining us today and taking this time with us to answer our questions. Truly inspiring, and thank you again for taking your time out of your very busy life to join us here at SSLA. Okay, I think it's the time that everyone's been waiting with anticipation for. It is our trivia question. So for a signed copy of the Frontline Generation, authored by Marjorie. So for everyone joining us on Zoom, you'll see two boxes on your Zoom display. One is Q&A and one is a chat box. You'll want to use that Q&A box to type in your response. And I think we'll also open this up to our viewers on Facebook too. So for our viewers on Facebook, if you want to type your response into the Facebook chat right by the video. Okay, so for a signed copy of Marjorie's book, again, the first correct answer will be our winner. What year was SSLA established? Again, the question, what year was SSLA established? We have a couple answers. Nope. Oh, all right, we have a correct one from Let's open this up here and make sure I got the timestamps correct. From Jennifer Hine, who correctly answered 1978. That's right, Jennifer. SSLA was established in 1978. So you are our winner of the Frontline Generation signed copy. So we'll reach out to you following the webinar and make sure we know how to get that book to you. Congratulations. Okay, so now I'd like to invite everyone to join us for our next virtual series session. It's called Not All Heroes Wear Capes. And this is another not missed session for our military moms in the group, especially. I think it'll resonate pretty loudly. So we'll hear from several women who will share how they balance their lives as military moms, the challenges they faced in their careers, and the importance of having a support system back home. So we'll hold that session on Monday, November 9th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So we hope you can join us. You can go to our website, cleader.org, or the SSLA Facebook page for the link to register for that. And if you like what you saw today, we encourage and invite you to join SSLA. SSLA is the only nonprofit organization dedicated to mentorship and professional development of women in the sea services. And we provide support to women in all branches of the military and in DoD. Because mentorship and development of military women is a critical issue that needs to be addressed by all, our organization is open to all, to men and women across all ranks, all services, and the Department of Defense. So your membership not only contributes to that important mission, but gives you access to resources like our member database, the opportunity to participate in regional task forces and committees, access to members-only events like our Leadership Book Club, and discounted registration to our annual Joint Women's Leadership Symposium. So as a lifetime member of SSLA, I can say that a membership in our organization is absolutely worth your contribution and your time, and it's such a big contributor to furthering our missions of fostering inclusion and developing future leaders. So as I mentioned before, the recording of today's webinar will be available on our Facebook page. We'd like to invite you to connect and converse with us on all of our social media pages. You can also go to our website, cleader.org, where you can find the latest updates on SSLA events and other professional development opportunities. And lastly, we're looking forward to hosting our in-person 2021 Joint Women's Leadership Symposium next spring or summer in Norfolk, Virginia. So dates and other details are TBD at this point as we continue to work through the COVID environment, but we're excited to once again hold this event. It continues to be the largest gathering of women in uniform and is recognized as the premier professional and personal development conference for military women. So again, this is a must attend, do not miss event for women and men of all ranks who want to benefit from networking, mentorship, education, and leadership development. So please stay tuned to our website and our social media pages for further announcements on that symposium. And with that, Marjorie, thank you again for just a fantastic presentation. Thanks to all of our members and attendees for joining us today. I'm excited to read your book and to see how I can tell my own story. And I hope everyone joining us today is inspired to do the same. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great day.